Well, the latest on the Epstein suicide is that the correctional officers who worked in a special unit inside the New York City jail that housed Epstein were overworked. They were on like 5 days of overtime, and they had staff shortages. And people who have been there have been working like 5 days straight, and it was just, well, they're tired. They're tired. Yeah. We welcome to the center ring of the conservative circus, Bill Marshall, who is a senior investigator with Judicial Watch in D.C. Now, he's been investigating the Epstein case. So let's start with the latest. The coroner has said that he needs more information before making a determination that Epstein committed suicide. Bill Marshall, is this believable, or is this sort of like something that you've seen all the time?
Well, I got to tell you, like everyone else, I'm just dumbstruck by this. I don't find it. I'm a skeptic by nature, so I don't find there's a lot that the government says that I don't find believable. Especially now that I've been working for Judicial Watch for 6 years, investigating the government. But this strikes me as particularly implausible. This whole story that you have a guy who was on suicide watch 2 weeks ago is suddenly taken off suicide watch, has his cellmate removed on Friday night, and then, lo and behold, nobody checks on him for 3 hours when they're supposed to be checking on him at least every 30 minutes, and he winds up dead. I just find it just so convenient for all those people who notwithstanding Attorney General Barr's claims that they shouldn't rest easy at night, I can't help but think that they're resting a little bit easier now at night.
We have Bill Marshall in the center ring. He is a senior investigator with Judicial Watch in D.C. Tell us about your investigation into Epstein. How long have you been investigating, and what have you discovered?
Yeah, I first actually started looking at him for Judicial Watch back in 2015. In January 2015, I submitted a FOIA request to the Secret Service. I asked for all. This was when the Epstein first came to sort of prominence in the news for his proclivities with young women. And I asked for all expenses, copies of all expenses for Secret Service agents going down to Orgy Island, Little St. James Island, this little island, that 77-acre island that Epstein owns down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, where he's got a palatial estate with mansions and outbuildings and all this. And because, of course, anytime the Secret Service travels anywhere with a former president like Bill Clinton, they have to incur lodging and meals and so forth. So this is, as you know, I'm sure, James, Judicial Watch tracks presidential expenditures, for any flights, any trips made by. We did this under the Obama administration. We do it under Trump, and we look at how much presidents are spending for their travel and so forth. And a big component of that is the cost of the security details and the Secret Service agents. So you would think that if President Clinton were going down to Orgy Island or Little St. James Island, as it's I guess really known, then there should be records, but of those expenses. But I got a no records found response, which was interesting. So we sued them over my request, because as we often do, as we often have to, because the government often, I don't want to say lies to us, but I'll say it lies to us about what records they really have. They play games, they play these semantic games about what records they possess, what they don't possess. So we find that a judge's order is often very helpful in compelling the government to produce records that it finds embarrassing, right? So, but anyway, we filed our lawsuit, and even with the judge's order, or with the government's agreement that it would search again, it allegedly could find no records. So that was back of Secret Service expenditures down at Little St. James Island. So time goes by. Then in July of that year, like 6 months later, I filed a new request for any communications between the Justice Department and the U.S. Attorney's Office and Epstein's attorneys related to the non-prosecution agreement that he signed with the Southern District of Florida. I think was the with Acosta. In any event, with the original non-prosecution agreement in 2008. Where he got this, wrist slap, this amazing deal, which got him off of any serious penalties, aside from like a year in a halfway house or something. And that produced no records. I believe the reason was they claimed attorney-client privilege to deny the records to us. So then time goes by, and then in July of this year, I decided to file new requests to the Secret Service for both Bill and Hillary, but a much broader request. I asked for any records at all, not just expenses of Secret Service agents, but any records at all from the Secret Service related to trips by Bill or Hillary Clinton to Little St. James Island, Pedophilia Island, Orgy Island, whatever you want to call it. That's still pending, and we may sue on that one shortly. I got an acknowledgement from the Secret Service that they got my request and they're processing it, which is the first step in the administration of in the sort of administrative steps that occur when you file a FOIA request. And then today I filed 2 new requests with the Bureau of Prisons for any paperwork at all related to Epstein's incarceration at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City. Related to his suicide. I asked for everything: audio, video recordings, log entries of the guards who were taking care of him, the roster of the guards that were supposed to be taking care of him, mental evaluation reports, communications among the Bureau of Prison officials about Epstein. I mean, I've asked.
You're just like everything you could think of. You're sitting here asking the questions, but I got to ask you, Bill Marshall. You've been doing this for years, and it's like you're trying to pull teeth from the government. They're not giving you anything. Now that Epstein is supposedly dead, how many secrets do you think he carried to the grave with him? Do you think that now that he's dead, you'll be able to get more information from the government?
Well, once a person dies, they lose all privacy rights, right? So we often file I think Judicial Watch pioneered this, but we file what we call internally called death watches with the FBI. As soon as a prominent figure, in the corruptocracy of the government dies, or even a private individual who we think may have a large FBI file. Usually we're going after progressives, and because we're a conservative organization, but. So we'll file a request because once a person dies, they lose their privacy rights, and the FBI, in theory, is supposed to turn over their records to us on that individual. Now they'll redact certain information for various reasons. There's like 9 different reasons that the government can withhold records, but so they'll redact some of that information, but. There's going to be, as you know, a mountain of information at the FBI about Epstein. And typically what they do in a high-profile case like this, which kind of undercuts our sort of journalistic mission somewhat, is that they'll post the records to their vault publicly so that everybody has access to them, which, of course, makes it no longer unique to us as a media organization. But I think they do that somewhat to spite us.
I think so, to undercut you. What's amazing to me is you're on the trail. You've been asking the right questions. Of course, the mainstream media is not asking these questions. You have the liberal MSNBC, CNN. They're not asking these questions. But these are questions that are like open secrets, I believe, among a lot of the elite in Washington, D.C. and in the corridors of power. And yet here we are. With this mysterious death over the weekend, with Judicial Watch and others asking many questions, and with the victims of Epstein wanting justice, where do you think this all goes?
Well, that's a good question, James. I'm like I said, at the outset, I'm kind of a cynical, skeptical individual, and I've become, more so over the years fighting the government. I used to work in the government. I was an intelligence analyst with the DEA many years ago. And I used to think back in those days that the government was kind of a big blundering, sort of force for good in the world.
And now that's changed.
I've revised my opinion somewhat. I mean, I know there are good people that work in the government, but on the whole, I think that I'm afraid to say that our government has largely turned against us in the sense that it is operating for itself. This phrase, the deep state, is kind of has this conspiratorial aura about it. But I think Glenn Greenwald originally coined the phrase, and he's a leftist, whereas I'm on the right. But we agree on that much, that the government has become a self-licking ice cream cone, as my boss calls it. It exists to preserve its own power and to increase its own power and to protect itself. That is its primary mission. It's not to serve the people; it's to protect itself. And we see that with the deep state types like Christopher Wray, who will will not produce records that Congress has the right to demand and has been demanding for congressional subpoenas, and he basically thumbs his nose even at the president that he nominally works for. So this is, in fact, I wrote a column. I write frequently for various publications like Town Hall and American Thinker and The Federalist. I wrote a column a couple of days ago for American Thinker called "America Needs 4 More Terms of Donald Trump."
I read that.
Well, thank you. I'm glad
Before I
somebody
knew
did.
you, I read that.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, I was speaking figuratively. We can't get 5 terms of Donald Trump, but that's which he would be prevented from that. Just based on on age, of course, but also from the 22nd Amendment. We wouldn't want a president serving more than 2 terms. My point, of course, was that we need someone like him. We need someone who's willing to buck this monolithic government for, and it may take a generation, it may take 20 years to break this stranglehold that these rogue agencies, these fiefdoms like the FBI and DOJ and CIA have. They look at presidents as they're relatively short-term occupants of the office, and they'll be gone. Whereas these apparatchiks will be there for decades and decades, and so they just want to preserve their own position.